Day 736 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 414,000 military personnel losses, which represents an additional 920 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 17 tanks, 30 APVs, and a relatively whopping 36 artillery. And of course, we see 3 military jets added to the list, but this update pertains to yesterday's mention on the incident, or indeed incidents. Then we'll head across to the map today and momentarily start out in St. Petersburg of Russia, as a fire started on the Ermak, a Russian icebreaker docked in St. Petersburg port. As such, it is now out of service and already slated for disposal. Now, there is no reference to a military incident causing this event, and indeed may be a completely unrelated event. But at the same time, it does almost feel like Russian ships in faraway ports are just spontaneously combusting as well now. Then we'll head across back into the Ukrainian map today, and we'll head to the Donbass in the eastern sector, which certainly continues to be quite an active area. For instance, starting out with a bit of push and pull that we saw. So we'll move across to the Bakhmut axis there, where some marginal gains were made by the armed forces of Ukraine in northwest of Klishchivka, which is just south of Bakhmut. Then also, around the same time, Russian forces have pulled up to their first street of Ivaniska, and I'll show you that there, so there you go, which of course is just west of Bakhmut. Now, Ivaniska has been somewhat a heavily fortified position by the armed forces of Ukraine for some time now. So it does remain to be seen how effective the Russian forces are at pushing forward from this direction. Most likely, what they'll end up doing is coming from the north and the south, at least in terms of attempts. Then heading a little bit further south, as Ukrainian defense forces in the Avdiivka sector continue to conduct defensive operations and in some locations regaining lost ground. Now, firstly, I'll state the Russian army is increasing the intensity of artillery shelling and is said to have been increasing the number of assault groups up to a battalion tactical group. In addition, they're throwing new reserves into the battle in the hopes of local successes. However, more specifically, the Ukrainian army denied Russian control over Berdichi, and in fact slightly pushed back Russian lines of control here. Then also, the situation is similar just south of here, where Russian forces briefly gained a foothold on the outskirts of Orlivka before Ukrainian forces ousted them from the settlement. Although I would say it is still likely Ukraine won't be able to hold the position for much longer. And then, since we're in the region, a kind of a Bermuda Triangle location for the Russian Su-34s and other various military aircraft in recent times, as it seems Ukraine has a weapon that can reach Russian planes at long distances, with 13 planes down in the last 2 weeks. And near as we can tell, none of them Russian-friendly fire incidents, which has certainly been known to happen, but most information for these incidents suggests that we're looking at the likelihood of these occurrences being due to the most recently received, the Ukrainian received, third Patriot air defense system from in just December last year. And so it would appear that the first two received had inherently decided to take a much more defensive posture, sticking to places like Kyiv and Odessa. However, the third one, most recent one, would appear to be roaming around the south-central regions of the Donetsk Oblast, just unobstructed and uninhibited, making use of those long-range anti-air missiles at its disposal. Because even just moments ago, well, here we go again. This time, an Su-35 allegedly disappeared from the radar in the vicinity of Mariupol, as noted in the Russian Telegram space. But we will have to wait for more information on that one. So why now? Why not have this recent string of Russian jet losses happen way back in December when Ukraine got its hands on its third Patriot battery? Well, I would certainly propose that this third Patriot air defense system was set up far behind the contact point in December and most of January to perform actual incoming missile defenses against Russian incoming missile salvos as part of their winter wave attacks against Ukrainian infrastructure. But as the weather has warmed up and the risk of these events significantly decreased, this third Patriot system then became freed up to go on the hunt. Gee, imagine what they could do with a fourth. Then looking around on the map, somewhere in the east, cleanup operations continue. For instance, behind Russian lines in Avdiivka, a Ukrainian drone drop munition landed into an abandoned Russian T-80 BV tank, causing a pretty catastrophic ammunition cook-off. Then also, this time it was a Ukrainian FPV drone successfully hunting down and disabling the latest and greatest Russian T-90M MBT main battle tank. Then, in somewhat of a similar fashion to the first mention, a Ukrainian drone dropped its load, hitting a fuel tank in or by a Russian trench. So those FPVs are coming out in full force, and I'll mention something about that shortly in the news section. But for a moment, we'll head across to the Kherson sector, and specifically in Krinky, as Ukrainian forces managed to expand the bridgehead inside Krinky to their west. And both Ukrainian and Russian sources confirm that Ukrainian troops have advanced west inside of Krinky towards Kazachi Lahiri, and are claims which once again fly in the face of Russian Defense Minister Shoigu's recent claims of Krinky being under full Russian control. Then just briefly as well, we'll move across to the Crimean Peninsula as Russian air defense continued to be quite active, this time near Simferopol, which Russian air defense is undoubtedly being kept busy or under threat. Then we'll head across to some news for today, some interesting news, as we have seen some new updated stats on Ukrainian drone production and their values produced for 2024, with Ukraine producing a whopping 200,000 FPV drones over the first 2 months of this year alone. Bearing in mind, I repeat, this is FPV drones alone. This does not include their other variants produced, including the Baba Yaga heavy drones and the medium and long-range drones that travel all the way up to St. Petersburg. So impressive. They promised big numbers like these, and now they deliver. Then at the same time, we saw plenty of Russian military crew complaining about not having this type of capacity. Then headed across to some Russian economy news. Some of my favorite segments that take a peek into the devastating impact of the Russian economy. So for this segment, in Russia, people are struggling with Union Pay, a Chinese payment platform that became essential after Visa and MasterCard stopped their services in the country because of the Ukraine war. Now, Union Pay cards, particularly those used by Huawei Pay, are reportedly failing in Russia. Now, this problem is linked to the US sanctions aimed at Russian payments, affecting transactions through Russia's national payment card system. And even though Russia and China have a strong alliance, apparently, and had declared a, quote, no-limits partnership, and this was just before the commencement of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which all turns this issue into marking a significant challenge for Russia. Because Russia turned to Union Pay for global transactions after losing access to Western payment services and the SWIFT banking system due to becoming the world's most sanctioned nation following its invasion of Ukraine. And while some of these physical Union Pay cards are still operational, the digital services via Huawei Pay faces disruptions, showing the impact of sanctions on Russia's financial activities and its international financial ties. Moreover, big Chinese banks have stopped taking payments from Russian entities under sanctions, fearing US repercussions. So this situation highlights how interconnected the global financial system is and the powerful role of US policy. Plus, China is dealing with its own property debt crisis and suffering from deflation. China is calling its debts in and knows its financial future relies on the West as opposed to just singularly Russia. Then in some other news, Alexei Navalny, a leading figure in the Russian opposition, was buried in Moscow after thousands of mourners attended his funeral on Friday. An impressive crowd, estimated to be around 20,000 people, stretched over 3 kilometers to pay their respects. And during this event, tensions rose as demonstrators shouted slogans against the war and against President Putin, leading to arrests. Chants of Heroam Slava, which is glory to the heroes, and Putin is a murderer, echoed, marking a significant moment of public dissent. And with a heavy presence of security forces, or Putin enforcers, many attendees were in fact prevented from saying their final goodbyes, with crowds pleading to be let through. This moment has sparked questions about potential political instability in Russia, with the government's harsh response under scrutiny. Whether it will lead to significant change or if it will be suppressed remains uncertain, but the sentiment of resistance and the potential for covert opposition activities have been clearly demonstrated already within the country itself. Then in some other news, Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama and Ukrainian President Zelensky recently signed a significant treaty on friendship and cooperation. This landmark agreement aims to enhance collaboration across a wide range of sectors, including trade, culture, education, healthcare, among others. And both nations have expressed a commitment to deepen their ties, with Albania standing firm alongside Ukraine in its battle against external aggression. And this type of news is worthy of a mention because whenever I hear about a friendship agreement between two nations these days, I think about that Russian-Ukrainian friendship treaty of 1997, which, by the way, was smack bang in the middle of many other Russian broken promises just like it. Never forget. Then moving across to a quick couple of funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So, one of Russia's top propagandists is doing her thing again. Margarita Simonyan. This time stating some bizarre history in an attempt to generate some enthusiasm, as she says, among the Russian population, with stating, quote, "Our country is at war. We need more enthusiasm. During the Leningrad siege, people were rationed with 125 grams of bread." Now, first of all, she called it a war. That's jail time right there. Slip of the tongue on her part, perhaps, for the editor-in-chief of RT News. But secondly, with what she said about during the Leningrad siege, people were rationed with 125 grams of bread. So this will not generate the motivation or quote-unquote enthusiasm she is looking for. Not by a long stretch. Then moving across to a final funny to round it off for today, guys. I know you'll appreciate this one because earlier today we saw a Russian Pantsir S-1 air defense system lay down to rest in southern Russia. Which is only made more funny by the fact that this air defense system was designed to be part of Vladimir Putin's security detail as it relates to an upcoming speech that he is meant to be doing in Sochi tomorrow. But now, Putin's security faces a dilemma, as these systems are now quite rare because of that, war he started right next door. And these things are top heavy. And whenever I see something like this, I say to myself, $20 million air defense system, 20-year-old conscript driver. That's our Russia. So that'll be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment. I really do enjoy reading those comments. You guys are so kind, and yeah, just thanks again, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.